In the quaint village of Greenfield, Pastor Elijah was known for his unwavering faith and powerful sermons. The villagers admired him and often sought his counsel. However, beneath his calm exterior, Elijah harbored a secret that gnawed at his soul, a sin he committed in his youth that he had never confessed to anyone, not even God. Years ago, when Elijah was just a young man, he was involved in a reckless accident that took the life of a stranger. In his panic, Elijah fled the scene, leaving the incident unreported. He tried to bury the memory deep within, but it haunted him every day. The guilt weighed heavily on his heart, and over time, he found solace in serving God, hoping that his good deeds might atone for his past. But the more he preached about righteousness and forgiveness, the more he felt like a hypocrite. One Sunday morning, as the congregation gathered for service, a stranger walked into the church. He was an older man with a stern face and piercing eyes. Elijah felt an inexplicable unease as the man sat in the back pew, silently watching him. Throughout the service, Elijah struggled to maintain his composure, sensing that this man knew something about him. After the service, the stranger approached Elijah. "Pastor Elijah, may I speak with you in private?" he asked. Elijah nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. They entered Elijah's office, and the man closed the door behind him. The stranger introduced himself as Daniel, the brother of the man Elijah had accidentally killed years ago. Elijah's face paled as he realized who Daniel was and why he had come. "I know what you did," Daniel said coldly. "I've known all these years. But I stayed silent, waiting for the right moment." Elijah's mind raced. He had always feared that his past would catch up with him, but now that it was happening, he felt utterly unprepared. "What do you want?" Elijah asked, his voice trembling. Daniel looked him in the eye and replied, "I want justice for my brother. You took his life, and you've been living yours as if nothing happened. I'm here to make sure you face the consequence." Elijah felt the walls closing in around him. He could lose everything, his reputation, his ministry, and the trust of his congregation. But more than that, he was terrified of facing God with this unconfessed sin hanging over him. That night, Elijah couldn't sleep. He prayed fervently, asking God for guidance. He knew he had to confess his sin, but the thought of public shame and disgrace terrified him. He wondered if there was any hope for redemption. The next morning, Elijah went to Daniel's home. He was prepared to do whatever it took to make amends. When Daniel opened the door, Elijah fell to his knees. "I'm sorry," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry for what I did. I've lived with this guilt for so long, but I know that doesn't excuse it. I'm ready to face whatever punishment you think I deserve." Daniel was silent for a long moment, then he sighed deeply. "I've waited years to hear you say that," he said. "I've hated you, Pastor Elijah, for what you did. But as much as I wanted revenge, something kept holding me back. I couldn't bring myself to ruin your life, even though I felt you deserved it." Just Elijah was bracing himself for Daniel's judgment, Daniel said something that stunned him. "There's something you don't know," Daniel began. "My brother, the one you think you killed, he survived the accident." Elijah's eyes widened in shock. "What? But how?" "After the accident, someone found him and took him to the hospital. He was in a coma for weeks, but he pulled through. The doctors said it was a miracle. He moved away after that, started a new life. He didn't want anyone to know about the accident or his past. He forgave you, Pastor, even before you knew he was alive." Elijah was overwhelmed with emotion. "He forgave me?" he asked in disbelief. "Yes," Daniel replied. "He said that holding on to anger wouldn't bring him peace. He found Christ and chose to forgive you. But I couldn't. I held on to my bitterness all these years. And now, seeing you like this, I don't know if I can continue hating you." Elijah broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. The weight of guilt that had crushed him for years was finally lifted, replaced by the grace of unexpected forgiveness. He realized that the forgiveness he had been seeking was already given, not just by the man he thought he had wronged, but by God. Daniel, too, felt a change in his heart. The anger and hatred he had nursed for years began to dissolve. He saw in Elijah a broken man who had been punishing himself for far too long. In that moment, Daniel decided to let go of his bitterness and forgive Elijah, just as his brother had done. The two men prayed together, asking God for healing and redemption. For Elijah, it was a moment of true repentance and reconciliation. He vowed to dedicate the rest of his life to living in the light of God's grace, no longer hiding in the shadows of his past.